All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda. Yes, ma'am. Yes, but Miss Dorothy won't. I'm not. Assistant Tanny. Do we know if Timmy's coming? No idea. Okay. I'm waiting on Miss Dorothy. I gotta wait for Miss Dorothy. Yes, let's stand for the pledge, please. Mr. Lachele, would you lead us in the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moment of silence. Okay, great. We'll go ahead and get started. First item on the agenda, the purchase of property for a new elementary school in Broussard. Dr. Aguilar.
Members of the Finance and Facilities Committee, the Lafayette Parish School System has been looking aggressively for property for a proposed new elementary school in South Lafayette. We've been working closely with Kyle Bordelon and his team, as well as the City of Broussard, specifically Mayor Longlinay, as well as the BO companies led by Stephen Hebert. We have looked at several iterations of possible sites for a new elementary school. Some of them have been challenged because the property either had a pipeline or had a pipeline near the proposed site, as well as issues maybe with the elevation of the proposed property. We did find a piece of property recently at the corner of Fairfield and Marteau Road. The proposed site is 15 acres. In conversations with both the City of Broussard and the BO companies, the property has had an estimated acreage value at $40,000 to $45,000, fully developed. The BO companies discounted the asking price to $27,500 per acre. City of Broussard recently authorized the city contributing $17,500 toward the purchase of those 15 acres. We think it's just an outstanding cooperation between all entities. The school board's cost for that 15 acres of property would be $10,000 per acre, or a total of $150,000. We haven't yet found any problems with the site. I would urge you to move this this item to the full board tomorrow night for ratification.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Joint Committee sends this item to the full board for approval.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to move it to the full board for approval. Are there any comments, questions, concerns from anyone in the audience here? Any other questions from board members?
I'd just like to say to the superintendent, to Mayor Longlinay and Mr. Hebert of the BO companies, thank you for the leadership you've shown and coming to an agreement that works for everybody involved and works for the school system, City of Broussard, and most of all the children of Broussard. So thank you.
I'd like to echo that also. Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you for working with us.
You all know how I feel, so thank you. All right, let's call for the vote. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think so. Call for the vote, please.
Five, for, none against.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next item and last item on the agenda, update on Westside Elementary School. Dr. Aguilar, Mr. Bordelon, who wants to kick that off?
Good evening, members of the Finance and Facilities Committee. Kyle Bordlawn, Director of Planning and Facilities. I have with me here tonight several people to give updates on the projects for Westside Elementary. Looks like first up will be Mr. Albert Moliere with Architects Beasley Moliere to talk about the renovations to the existing facility, Westside Elementary. Albert?
Thank you, Kyle. I brought along some schedules. I'd like to pass these out. If you look at the schedule, this is what we are currently working on. Give you a little quick history of where we started. Once the school got flooded, ServPro went in and cut all the gypboard, all of the wood, everything from just above the water line down. And that led us into to trying to put together a schedule and work on being able to get the school open again for this January coming. Of course, that didn't happen once FEMA got involved. So once FEMA got involved, we put together this schedule. And as you can see, if you start at the bottom and work back, we are shooting for a date, an open date of January 18 for Westside Elementary School. And to do that, we go back 10 months. We figure the construction time is going to be for 10 months. And then we start stepping up in what we have to do. In order to get that done, we would have to have all of the asbestos out of the building prior to contractor being able to get in. We have a contract date that we're shooting for of February, when the contractor would actually get contract and get started towards the end of February. This all leads us to a possible bid date, advertising to bid the very 1st of January. I believe the first meeting here is going to be January 4th. To make all of these things happen, there's a lot of things that have to fall into place. And of course, we always have the FEMA thing sitting over the top of our heads, and we're not sure how that's going to play out. We have these boards. Tommy, get that board and bring it up where they can see it better. I have a couple of these size if anybody wants to look at them, anybody interested. What we're looking at doing, as we got involved in the project, one thing led to the next, and we had to look at like-kind repairs and what would be done to put the school back to what it was. And as soon as you start getting into that, then you start getting into the code issues. ADA, all of the toilet rooms have to be upgraded to ADA. All of the hardware on the doors have to be upgraded to ADA. Anything we touch with the damage, that particular thing we touch has to be brought up to current code. Once you reach a certain point, the entire building has to come up to code. So basically, where we are headed at this point is to the original building it has a lot of wood in it. It's constructed with a lot of wood. So we are looking at changing the school to a different code classification to be able to meet the current codes and go to non-combustible. This means pulling out all of the wood and putting in metal studs. As a part of mitigation with the FEMA side of it, so that Mitigation meaning, if we have another flood event, what can we do to make it a whole lot easier to get back into the school? So we're looking at replacing all of the walls with concrete block walls. And other things like putting a hard floor down that can withstand the water, and getting all of the millwork up off the ground a certain distance, so on and so forth. In going through this, basically, we are looking at almost a complete renovation of the school. And if you look at the boards, you'll see a lot of new new architecture coming in on the exterior of the school. As part of this, basically, the brick walls that are probably 25–30% of the brick walls have wood backup, so they're going to have to come down and go back up. And when we start looking at that, instead of going back with the brick, we're looking at going back with some metal panels that would allow for, you know, an upgrading of the exterior. The metal panels are actually a little bit less expensive than the brick. Square footage, the footprint stays identical. So what you're seeing here is we're adding air conditioning inside of these things. We have fresh air ducts in here. This is the stage, which now has an orange metal roof that's all got wood frame construction in it. That would get replaced with actually this is the library. This is the stage here. And so we're gonna brighten up the whole thing, at the same time save some cost on what we would have to do to put the block in, CMU in, and put the brick back on it by going with the metal panels. Where we are right now today, we are about 60% finished the contract documents. Within the next 2 weeks, we will probably be having another meeting to get approval on where we are, and then we're going to be finishing up a bid package. And our goal is to try to have that bid package finished before the end of the year, so that it can come in front of you guys to for approval, and we can put it out to bid in January. Any questions?
Broussard?
Would it be easier to level the whole thing instead of tearing something down and putting it back up? How much money would we save if we save anything just to level the whole thing and just start from scratch?
I'm gonna put my finger in the air. I would say that if we were to level it and build anew, it's going to be probably twice the cost that we're looking at today. Then they have other implications with that. If we were to put it back on the same site, we could elevate it, which would be a good thing. But at the same time, having reimbursements from FEMA would get more complicated, and having reimbursements from the insurance company might also get to be more complicated. And I'll let maybe Rick talk a little bit about it if y'all want to hear a little bit more about the FEMA side of it. In where we are now, we're probably somewhere around between $125 and $140 a square foot, depending on what mitigation we go with and what we don't, as opposed to probably about $225 a square foot to do new, plus the demolition.
So you talked about the elevation. So what the cost would be to elevate it? Would that be a better choice than the brick, or what options do we have there?
Obviously, if we can afford it, then elevating it. Really, the only way to elevate it is to bulldoze it, as you suggested, and build anew. But obviously, elevating it would be a great idea. I just don't know if we have the funding to do that, and that's not really my place. But you're probably looking at where we're somewhere around $6 million construction cost to do what we're looking at. You probably double that
Okay,
just to get the same footprint.
if we had the same type of flood happen again with all those renovations you're speaking of right now, what would happen with the brick walls? And so would water actually get into the schools, and what type of damage would that cause?
It depends on the mitigation that FEMA goes with and allows, or again, if we have the budget to do things. They have several different things that they've been discussing out there, and again, I might let Rick talk about that a little bit, but the mitigation that we're headed to in these drawings is to put the concrete block in. We'd be filling the first 3 cells solid, and by having the metal panels on the outside, it'll have the drainage to get out of there. And by putting the hard floor and lifting up the millwork, theoretically, you get flooded 3 days later, you squeegee it out and mop it down, and you're back in business. They also have talk about putting a flood wall around the property. They have talk about putting a flood wall around the building itself. There was some talk about hydro levees, which is basically a big rubber tube you fill up with water and it holds the water out. Where and how that happens is still being discussed, those issues. What we are tasked with is to get the children back into the school as soon as possible. So we're working feverishly to meet this schedule. And once the schedule gets met, then I'm assuming that at that point FEMA's going to really get into the drawings and have this to say and that to say and so on and so forth. But if we are going to get the children back in school January 18, it has to move forward in this manner. If we get pushed back 2 months, then you're looking at August 18. And unless you wanted to move in the in mid-school, but if you're looking at a start date for school, then you're looking at pushing it back to August. If we were to start looking at tearing the school down, building a new school, you can probably put another year to year and a half onto that schedule. As far as the finances are concerned, I don't really want to get into that. That's not my side of it. I don't know if somebody else wants to handle that, but
Yeah, I'd like someone to handle the finances, because 2 things. Number one, I mean, we're building a high school, and it looks like we're going to remodel another school and maybe, obviously, build another school to be open in a year and a half. Why does this one take so long if it did have to be rebuilt? And secondly, we have learned here in this parish, for whatever reason, we're paying an excessive amount for construction costs, especially compared to just about everybody else we've researched. So have we gotten a handle on this construction cost so that we can really compare, remodel versus rebuild?
Okay, so I'm not sure I want to answer that question. I don't know that we've gotten a handle on why does it cost over $200 a square foot. Part of it is just the nature of the workforce in Acadiana and the contractors that we have available to us. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at a rehabilitation cost of about $130 or so a square foot versus brand new construction at least $180 a square foot if we go with low-end products. So that's really where we are now. The construction time is pretty much in line with what Architects Southwest is telling us for Catherine Drexel. It's going to take some time to program a new elementary school. It's going to take time to locate property. It's going to take time to have the construction documents in place and bid it out, and then for construction to occur. It's just the nature of where we are. And I sense you want to know what to do about the options, and we haven't yet even finalized, where we are with the current claim. The insurance people are still working and talking to us. Our flood consultant is working very closely with FEMA, so we still have some negotiating to do to get us to the point where we rehabilitate Westside Elementary School. So it really is an important decision for the board about what do you want to do. So if you do want to close out this claim and reach a settlement with our insurance company and FEMA, and we use the proceeds to find another piece of property and we build a new Westside Elementary School, we're going to need some either bonding capacity, which we don't have right now, or you will need to dip into reserves to fund this new school. I mean, we are at the point now where we don't have $15 million of bonding capacity. So if you don't want to dip into reserves to pay the difference for this new construction, then we have to look seriously at this option to rebuild. You want to know more about, I'm thinking, what happens in future floods, and we're not quite yet. We haven't finished the conversations with FEMA about, what are some possibilities. I understand we have an engineer from Scott. Are you guys have some thoughts about flooding in the city of Scott as well. So, I think it's timely you have this conversation because we really need to know what it is you want to do. We're getting ready to build a temporary school. FEMA's going to pay 90% of that, plus our insurance company proceeds, so we need guidance from the board.
Good evening. Jean Hornsby. I'm with Fenstermaker and Associates, and I'm one of the city engineers for Scott. Actually, before the flood ever occurred in August, Mayor Morrison and I had been working for a good 6 months plus, looking at areas in Scott that have repetitive loss claims, frequent flooding. And the West Side Elementary area, we call it the Deloma Avenue area, has some homes that fell into that category. In addition, we had also had complaints of not flooding of West Side Elementary, but high water, getting kids out. So this has always been a focal area for Purvis to see improvements. Just a little tidbits of information to think about. You hear the August 2016 flood, and in areas of Lafayette Parish, it was a 500+ year flood. At Westside Elementary, it was about a 50-year flood. We saw about 8 inches of water is what we surveyed in the school. Looking at modeling and kind of how does this area react in other events. The school surveyed in at 32.3 feet. A 10-year storm, we predict, would have an elevation of about 32.5 feet. So what we're saying is, even in smaller events, the school would have a potential for flooding. So y'all may want to take that into consideration on flood walls, berms, other options, if you do not demo the school and rebuild. Are there any questions y'all have that I can maybe shed some light on? The flood for this one, was a 33 feet. So the school was at 32.3, 100-year. What y'all saw was a 100-year flood extent. The reason for that is the backwater from Ildacon actually came into the city itself. So you saw a rainfall of a 50-year, flood extent of a 100-year. What I tell a lot of people in Scott, it could have been a lot worse. It could have been what they saw in Youngsville. So, again, any questions y'all may have?
Do the drain have anything to do with why it's flooding? That area is flooding more than the rest of the town of Scott. I mean, it's an old area of town.
It is.
Drainage, and if drainage would improve at that part of Scott, would that eliminate some of the flooding problems in the school?
One of the things that we're working with Purvis, and you'll hear it, I heard something on the news and it's quite similar, is regional detention. Why are we keep hearing the word regional detention and things like this? This is an old part of town. It has built up, unfortunately, between I-10 and Highway 90 and the railroad tracks. So really the water is caught. One of the things I hear constantly is we'll just open up the railroad tracks and everything will be great and the water won't be at West Side anymore. We open up the tracks, the 50-plus homes downstream that flooded during the storm, we would increase that to 75 to 100. So the water we can't just open it up and release your problem downstream. So that's kind of one of the difficult things. And in a city where everything's built out, there's very limited property within the city to put a regional detention pond. In fact, I'm sure some of y'all may have even heard, one of the sites we looked at was behind the school, just very high level. Is there a pond you could put? It ended up being like a 4-acre pond, 8 feet deep, would get you out of the 10-year flood, 25-year flood, and protect your school from that. I mean, so drainage, it's not as easy as just clean the channel or open up put larger culverts and we'll just push it downstream. So I hope that answers your question a little bit.
I have a question. So as an engineer, do you see the possibility of a berm being built around West Side Elementary School that could give the school some additional protection?
Yes, I think that is an option. I mean, it's not necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing, and parents may you go to school and you've got a berm around your school, but it would work. The good thing, and I say that very lightly, is what I told y'all. The schools, we're talking about 33 feet is what you saw in a 100-year. 32 and a half is what you see in a 10-year. Your school's at 32.3. Natural ground's at 32. It's not a big berm. We're not talking about a 5-foot wall around the school. You're talking about maybe a 2-foot berm. So nothing large. A lot of times, though, when you run into berms, and that's more the engineering design portion, do you need a pump? Do you have maintenance? If you hear floodgates, I heard that there was a school somewhere in South Louisiana that everybody left, the gates weren't closed, and the school still got water. So, I mean, there's all of these little things that add to that. Would you like to comment on the berm option, or?
I think that the berm option is very viable, and if you're talking about a 3-foot berm, I don't think we need floodgates. I think we could do it with up and a down grade at the entrance and the exit. I don't think that it would be that big of an eyesore or an aesthetic thing.
So members of the board, it's possible that this 3-foot berm could be a solution to get us some additional flood protection that keeps us still in the ballpark of trying to keep the school where it is today and rebuild it quickly enough that we get these kids back.
Thank you. Did we want to have an update from insurance or FEMA representatives? Thank you, Ms.
Sorry.
Jean. Oh, did you have anything else, ma'am?
No, that's all.
Thank you very much.
Let's talk about that later. That's the original drawing. Rick? Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Andre Como, Regions Insurance. What I've tried to do here is put our hands around all of the numbers that you might need to consider for this. Starting with the architect's scope of work that Albert is describing here tonight, it's a total budget of $7,022,052, and I boxed out construction and professional fees, so that's what we're going to be talking about with regard to insurance. As of today, 12/6, in the next box, the replacement cost for like, kind, and quality, that's just the cost to repair and replace what was damaged in the 8 inches of water that got into the school. The number is $1,611,903. Now, there's depreciation shown there. You will actually get paid for the replacement of what is described here in what it actually costs you to replace it. The amount of money that's available today does not include the depreciation amount. They wait until that expense is actually made before they make that money available. But they have made money available based on just these figures. The adjusters continue reviewing the architect's report. Just yesterday, they had engineers on site inspecting mechanical equipment and electrical. In the scope of the architect's scope of work, there was mechanical and electrical work to be done as a result of humidity getting into the air conditioning systems and the possibility of mold. And so that's not contemplated in the first number you see there, the 1.6 million. So we're waiting for the adjusters to give us the information as to what they believe actually was damaged, what has to be replaced, and what the cost of that might be. So we expect that number will change. The adjusters have also identified, with the help of Mr. Moliere's architect report, 1.2, almost $1.3 million in additional costs beyond replacement of like-kind quality because of the codes that you have to meet. The buildings were constructed first in '53, renovated in 1980. Today's codes require more in the way the buildings are built than they were. So we have that number. Now, what we've asked the adjusters to do is to take the architect's scope of work and detail out for us what the architect's scope of work estimates in costs and what they estimate in costs, and identify for us where those differences are. Because as you can see, the bottom line is, we're at almost $3 million on the insurance. You're looking at 6.4 construction and fees for the scope of work. And so that continues. Other estimated insurance proceeds for West Side, and I should back up and say the numbers you're looking at are just for West Side. We have additional expenses associated with repair at some of the other campuses. None of them are anywhere near the dollar figures we see here, but they're not included here. Insurance will pay, the policy you have will pay for not only the extra expense associated with getting upgrade to codes, but it also pay for temporary expenses during what they call the period of restoration. And we expect that the extra expense for the temporary campuses are going to be included in that. And as soon as you all have a number on what you expect to expend for that, we will submit that to the insurance adjusters and ask them to include that, what they anticipate paying. Policy also addresses extra transportation expense, again, during the period of restoration. And so far, claims for August and September, additional transportation have been made, and the insurance companies have agreed to $13,000 of those costs. Employee CAT pay, you had to pay people overtime for special work that they did associated with recovering from the flood. We have some of that information. And I also understand that there is going to be a proposal for some additional expense for additional teachers that'll be needed to accommodate the additional amount of time that your schools are open because of the temporary campus. I expect that the insurance companies will address those expenses as well. Cleanup and demolition. The insurance companies have negotiated with ServPro. My understanding is that they have come to an agreement for the West Side cleanup and demolition of $242,000. Contents. So several of the teachers have submitted expenses or costs associated with loss in their classrooms. So far, $22,000 has been addressed or identified. And then asbestos and lead abatement has to take place. I understand that there is a process underway to get a bid to have that work done. We expect to submit that to the insurance company and ask for that to be paid as well. So that's I tried to identify the different groups of numbers that are moving here, give you a comparison to the architect's scope of work, and then yet to be determined is what FEMA might be able to do for you in addition to these things. Now, your property insurance policy does have a $1 million deductible or retention, and FEMA has committed to 90% of that, or $900,000 payment, just for the fact that you have a deductible. Any questions on any of that?
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Yes,
I have a
ma'am.
question for Dr. Aguilar. How long is it going to take to install the portable buildings and have that ready to go for the kids for West Side?
Okay, so we had on the agenda tomorrow night to select an architectural firm for the design of the temporary school. We also have a cost estimate that we're going to bring to the board tomorrow night for the temporary school, so we want your approval on that as well. So I think the delivery is at 60 to 90 days from the contract signing. The buildings will start arriving. We'll have to run utilities and whatnot. So I think we're probably thinking the temporary school will open in August. Kyle, am I thinking correctly? We're probably going to see the temporary school operational in August.
Yes, Dr. Aguilar, you're correct. There's a outside chance that we could possibly have the temporary campus hooked up and available by the end of the school year. But one of the big questions that I've talked to Dr. Aguilar about is, do you really want to move those children at that critical point in time when the testing is going on, which could jeopardize some of their testing? So as a best case scenario, April, May, we could have the buildings connected, but at that point you're at the end of the school year and you're in the middle of testing, so it's more likely that we would move in August.
I was just thinking, once they're moved into the school, there's no rush to make a decision on what we're going to do with West Side, whether we renovate, build a new school. So I just wanted to kind of, bring that thought out that we have time to maybe look at the costs, how much it would cost to build a new school versus the renovations, and then we could make a decision, well, depending on the cost. So there's no rush, and I know we want to get them back into their school, but they will be in the portable school. That will be their school. And so I'm not sure what's the rush on making the decision on renovation and the decisions we're going to make, to repair West Side Elementary.
You are correct, however, it's prudent to point out that if we're going to stop the train, we need to do that quickly, because we're talking about asbestos abatement, and the architects are talking about being 60% complete with the construction documents. So if we're going to, and then we would let that out on bid for a contractor. So if we're going to stop the train, we need to do so early in January of next year.
Hi, Dr. Aguilar. I'd like to add one point. My name's Rick Patterson. I work for Wood O'Brien's and was brought in by the board to help with the FEMA claim and work with the insurance company to maximize reimbursements. One of the things that you need to consider is that both the insurance company as well as FEMA will only fund that temporary campus for the length of time it takes to make the repairs that they deem eligible. So if making the repairs to the school, mitigating the school, if everybody agrees and projects that should take 12 months or 18 months, then FEMA and the insurance company are only going to participate in funding the rental of those facilities for that period. It may take 2 or 3 years to program out a new school and repair, find a location and build a whole new school. Part of that time, then that lease would be the responsibility wholly of the school board and school system. Does that make sense? I mean, it's kind of convoluted and we get into all the bureaucracy. But I don't want the school board to believe that they could have these temporary campus for 3 or 4 years and FEMA and insurance would just sign the check and everything would be fine. There would be questions about how long the insurance company and FEMA would be responsible for those facilities.
That would be a conversation that we would have to have, so we would know exactly, and we could decide how to move forward. We would want to know how much time we have from FEMA, and that way we can make a decision on that.
Yes, ma'am. Do you have a report or anything? Well, what I did want to make sure is that there are multiple options for mitigating the school that we can look at as a school system. The one that we think is the most cost-effective and the one that would allow to get the children back into the campus as quickly as possible is the combination of wet and dry flood proofing the school, going back in with the concrete walls that are substantially waterproof, going back in with the hardened floors which would not break up and separate in another flooding event. The things that Albert had mentioned earlier would be the suggested way to go, and that we've already had some agreement and some positive discussions with FEMA about approaching mitigation in this manner. The concern that I have for the FEMA program with looking at doing a berm or some type of flood wall is that FEMA's public assistance program will only mitigate the damaged element. And in this case, the damaged element is the school and the interior spaces. And if you're talking about a berm that for construction may need to include outbuildings, parking lots, things that weren't damaged, FEMA may question the eligibility of funding that mitigation under the public assistance program. And those conversations would stretch out the length of time that we identify what funding would be available to the school board. The other thing that the school board needs to consider is that if the school board chooses to relocate the school, any additional funding from FEMA for code and standard upgrades or for mitigation would be forfeited in a new building at a different location. So if FEMA identifies and funds mitigation and code and standard upgrades to repair West Side at its current location, and the school board decides to take what's called an improved project and move to a different location, you jeopardize that funding. And you could jeopardize some of your insurance recovery, but I don't want to speak for Andre. Right. So
nothing's foolproof. I mean, we could have a 1,000-year storm. However, rebuilding in a much better location, assuming that the cost wasn't necessarily double, FEMA is going to frown upon that, as opposed to paying money toward the existing facility that may possibly also flood again, and they would have to come in and assist us to clean up again.
That is
A lot of
correct.
sense.
That is correct.
I'll pay for you to get on a plane and go explain that to them, all right?
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
So, do you think,
If it helps, Monday I will be in FEMA headquarters and I can express your.
Please let us know what their response is to that statement. I look
what do you
forward to
think
it.
about elevating the school? I know you said that would be maybe Is that an option? Would FEMA go for that? Or is that?
I think elevating the school is one of the sure ways to prevent it from flooding again. The issue becomes, how do you elevate the school cost effectively? At the end of the day, you have between 1.6 and $7 million in damages that FEMA is going to determine is eligible. So how do you have to provide cost-effective mitigation. So basically, to be cost-effective, the mitigation measure should not cost more than the repair again. So if elevating the school at the best end costs more than another $7 million, FEMA would determine it wouldn't be cost effective. They would rather go back in, gut it again, repair it again, and go through this cycle. Because the other thing that really comes into question is how many times has this elementary school flooded since 1951 to where you made either an insurance or some other type of claim?
It has flooded. They had water in the school, right, before? You're not sure? Because they always had problems with water at West Side.
I mean, ideally, anything that can be done to elevate the school to prevent it from having those damages again is great. But to get that participation from FEMA, we have to establish that those measures are cost effective.
I'm just thinking like a house. I know I'm from Lafayette Parish, Youngsville. A lot of homes flooded. And FEMA would give the extra money to elevate the homes so it wouldn't flood again. So they wouldn't be back to square one, like you mentioned before, going through the same, taking the kids out of the school, putting them back into the school. So I guess I'm just thinking on those lines. That's not, FEMA doesn't look long-term and say, we want to avoid having this happen again. And then use their money wisely and invest in fixing it the way it's supposed to be fixed, so you don't have to come back to the table and do all this all over again. Move the kids out of the school, and what are we doing now?
Right. And I think from a residential standpoint, the technology and the application to elevate those houses, even if they're slab on grade, is something that's there. But when you're talking about a structure that's 40,000 square foot, there's really just not a commercial method to do that has been proven successful over a long period of time. So you have to basically go back to square one and start with a new elevated slab.
All right, well, thank you. It doesn't look like there's any action to be taken here other than just to accept the report. Do we have any other comments from anyone else on this agenda item? Board members, committee members. Okay. Can we get a motion to just accept the report since they're recommending action?
A second.
What have we been doing for the last 45 minutes?
Mr. Centani, don't block the process. There's a motion and a second to accept the report that was given. Call the vote. Motion is to accept the report for the update on West Side Elementary School. Mr. Bruce Orders made the motion, and Ms. Morrison seconded the motion. What did we just do? Well, that might not be too bad.
Just one other thing we were talking about, if y'all could provide us with pictures of schools that have the, what do you call it, the urine around it, and so we could kind of see what it looks like and communicate with other schools and see how that works. That would be nice, just to get an idea, because I have no idea what you're talking about. Thanks.
Do that.
Oh, Miss Mary, you want to, oh. All right, go ahead. Yeah, we good. We have to go home.
4 for, 1 against.
Motion carries with no further items on the agenda. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.